Yeah, and if you don't learn the local language, you will never enter inside their culture. Uh,
Okay, thank you so much, Ayoub, for joining me here on Dreaming English. Can you like introduce yourself and let us know where you're from?
my pleasure. So I'm Ayoub. Nice to meet you all. I'm 30. I was born in Casablanca, Morocco, but I grew up in Italy. I grew up in this small island. It's actually a big island called Sardinia. Uh, but then I moved to the mainland of Italy in a city called Genoa. Um, so I moved to Italy when I was like 6 years old. So I'm bilingual. I speak Italian and Moroccan Arabic. Moroccan Arabic is very different from the rest of the Arabic from other countries in
Other
the Middle East.
countries?
Yeah, example, I had like a housemate from Egypt, and we had to use English uh,
Really?
because because so I grew up in Italy, so I only know the dialect, the Moroccan Arabic. I don't know the standard Arabic. I never studied in school, and I consider English my third language, uh, despite I'm not fluent. Trying, I'm working on it.
Okay. Well, it
Um,
sounds like you're doing really good. And I think you were gonna tell me about how like English has changed your life.
yeah. So first of all, I had to. I started studying English when I was in the elementary school. I was in the I think third grade when I was like 10 years old, something like that. And then when I was 16, I got a scholarship to study for a semester abroad in an English-speaking country. I chose the USA. I went to Michigan for 6 months. So I remember it was terrible at the beginning because what I learned in my school in Italy, it was nothing. It was like uh, the the teaching in Italy was very very bad. Now it's improved. Like 15 years later, has improved because now I met many young many teenager and they have a good English. Also because now of there are many platforms on YouTube, many app. English is everywhere. So Italy used to rank very low in English fluency. Now had improved. Had improved. Um, so I went to Michigan. The first couple of months, I was like English was like Chinese to me. Uh, it took a little time for me to adjust, uh, but I can say that I learned English fluently when I came back here to Italy because I started to use what I learned, the little that I learned in America. I started to using it here. I started watching series on Netflix in original language, reading books, um, watching a lot of documentary on YouTube. Uh, I think that you can learn a language. You don't have to go to a country to learn it. Uh, you need to love that language. I know people here who are for like 5, 10 years, and they don't speak a word of Italian. I'm not talking about all the immigrants. I'm talking about young people. So people from like people who moved here for the university, they were like 18, and they are now like 30, and they don't speak Italian at all.
So they
Um,
get by. What are they speaking? Are they speaking English then, or
yes, they speak in English. They speak in English.
okay? And
And this,
that seems to be like a common theme that I hear from people that you can you can go and travel around, and if you know English you can get by. You can go to Italy, you can go to, somebody was telling me they went to I think it was like Switzerland or something, and they didn't, at the time, the first time they went they didn't know English, but the second time they went they could get by speaking English because their language they didn't speak. I, what do they speak in Switzerland? I don't even know.
yeah, in Switzerland they speak German.
German,
They
okay.
speak
So they didn't speak German, so they could, but they could speak, when they could speak English, they could get by.
yeah, no. Like Germany, sorry, Switzerland has like 4 languages.
Four languages, okay.
Like the main language is German, then French, Italian, and they have a dialect spoken. It's very Swiss, like spoken like in the inner Switzerland called Romancho, something like that. I forget.
Okay.
Anyway, my brother lived in Germany for like 10 years. He moved to Switzerland. He moved like he lived like in the border with Germany, but the Swiss German is quite different from German that they speak in Germany.
Well, that's interesting.
So I was saying like English has a negative side. Like if you speak English and you move around the world, sometimes you are not motivated to study the local language. This is a negative things about English.
Right, like you said, those students that went there for university in Italy, but they've been there still 10, 15 years later, and they haven't even tried to speak or learn Italian. Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I feel like even my daughter, like I wanted my daughter to learn the language, and she was starting to learn Spanish, but I think as native English speakers, sometimes we don't feel it. Like, well, I don't really need to learn another language because I can go to Italy and I can just speak English to people, and I can go to Switzerland and I can speak English to people. And she doesn't have the motivation. And you said those people could live there for 15 years and they can get by without speaking the language, which is in a way kind of sad, that people are not bothering or don't see the value of learning another language. I know English is like this international language and you can use it everywhere, but there's a value of learning other languages because one, it's good for your brain. You can communicate with more people, so there is a value in learning other languages besides English.
Yeah, and if you don't learn the local language, you will never enter inside that culture. This is, I think people should also learn the local language, especially if they want to live longer in a certain place.
So, what other ways has like learning English changed your life?
So, media example, uh, if you read the media only on your native language, you will have a limited knowledge, a limited mindset. In my case, so first of all, I want to clarify, I cannot read in Arabic. I cannot read in Arabic and write. I just speak it. I just speak Arabic. It's actually Moroccan Arabic with my parents. So I don't use Arabic in the internet. In the internet, I only use Italian and English. So if it wasn't for my English, if it was just for my Italian, I would have like a limited knowledge. Thanks to English, you can read news from the US, UK, Australia, and English is also lingua franca, so it's used globally. It's also used by non-native English speaker. Let's say German. There are news. There are newspaper in English language from Germany, so you can see how in Germany they think.
Mm-hmm.
it open your brain, your mindset, your knowledge.
Interesting. And I want to like circle back. You had mentioned that you had a chance to live in the United States in Michigan, actually, which I've been to Michigan many times. My best friend is from Michigan. She lives 20 minutes south of Detroit. So your experience living, you said you lived in United States for a bit and had a chance to learn, but you really kind of like learned more when you returned. But how was your your experience living here?
Uh, uh, so when I went there, I was like 17. I turned 18 there in the US. I had an amazing experience. Uh, it was so different from what I expected. Like, I moved to a small town where they were all like white. Like, and I was like, where are the African American? Where are the Mexican? Where are the? Once I moved to the US, I learned that the small towns are mostly white, and there are mixed people, races, only in big cities. So I was like, where are the Mexican? Where are the Jews? That was my impression when I went to the US. I was living in a town, a small town called, a small village called Quincy. It was in the border with Indiana. It
Okay.
was like 3 hours from Chicago. I remember when I went to Chicago, it was wow, another world.
Another world. Yes, that's exactly it. I
Yeah,
mean, that's exactly true. Like, unfortunately, there was something called redlining that happened here in the United States, where basically, it's sadly mortgage companies and whatnot would not give loans to African Americans and other people of other races in these small suburban towns. So, but it ends up being generational, and so in these small towns like you experienced in Michigan, and in here where I live, that's exactly the way it still is. I think things are a little bit more. Definitely, there are more people from. I live in a small town and I have a lot of people from Latin America or Puerto Rico and whatnot, but it's definitely the case. So you were here, like, was it a exchange student program?
yeah, I was living with a local family.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, we had a lot of exchange students, but I haven't seen that happen as much. But I do work in a high school, and I just came across my first exchange student for a very long time. She's from Japan. I almost thought they stopped doing that. So that's interesting that you had that experience.
Yeah, I something that like amazed me, that, like shocked me. It was like the Amish. Where I was living, there were a lot of Amish, and I was like, how can these people live in the 21st century, in the most advanced economy? They still live like 200, 300 years
Yeah.
ago,
I think
and
maybe
they
you
don't.
might have seen some of the Mennonites there too. Mennonites and the Amish are very similar.
Yeah, uh, I yeah, and I was like, they still speak German because they came from Austria, Switzerland. They kept their culture, and I was like, um, I only know another case of people who kept their language. I think the Jews, some Orthodox Jews in New York, they still speak Yiddish.
Yeah, I
I
mean
don't
there
know any. Yeah,
here that's happened, but like I think some like where I live there was the Italian section and there was a French section, and
yeah,
for the first two generations people kept their language, but then by the time you got to the grandchildren they were just all assimilated and they were speaking English and they didn't really understand. They probably could understand the Italian but they couldn't speak it, and then after that forget it. My grandmother was for Italian and my grandfather was French, and I don't really know a word of Italian except
yeah,
kabish, something like kabish.
yeah. I saw something similar. So the closest country that I visited, the closest culturally to the US, was Israel. Israel is also a melting pot. Um, I went there twice, and I had like an amazing experience. There were people from Poland, Russia, Middle East, a lot of Americans. Most of them, they are integrated. They speak Hebrew, except in some ultra-Orthodox area where they still speak Yiddish. I went to Jerusalem. There is an amazing neighborhood called Mea Sharim. And wow, I felt like I was in a ghetto, in like an Eastern European ghetto where the Ashkenazi used to live. And it was like amazing. Like you were in the Middle East, but you feel like you are in Eastern Europe.
Well, yeah, that is amazing and interesting. I met somebody that lives in Israel recently and had actually a conversation that we'll post on my channel this coming week. So it's interesting to learn a little bit about that country as well. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been really interesting, and I hope that we can have more conversations in the future.
Okay, bye.
Bye.